Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. I'm your host, Ike. I'm here with Charlie. Say hello, Charlie.
Hi, Ike.
How's your fine morning going?
I just started, and I'm getting my booster shot in a couple hours. So I think that the course of the day will not be determined until the evening.
All right, well, before you get boosted, let's boost the audience with your presence and these answers. First up, what's your favorite dad joke?
So the favorite one I ever told spontaneously was, so I'm a professional poker player, and in poker there's a thing called slow rolling, which is when you have the winning hand and you know you have the winning hand, but you intentionally wait to reveal it until well after the other person has revealed their hand. And it's generally seen as being rude, but in the right context, it can also be sort of funny. So we've got all these players from other countries here in Los Angeles who come to play poker. And there's one from Australia who's a professional poker player, and everybody liked him. He was really friendly and funny. And he did this to another player he knew in a very small pot as a joke. He slow rolled him, waited to reveal his hand in a really small pot, like $45 or something like that. And someone else at the table says, "That's an Australian slow roll." And I said, "In Australia, they slow roll in the opposite direction."
That might be the most inside joke dad joke I've ever heard, but I love it. I love it nonetheless. What's your favorite underutilized word, my friend?
I like the word implacable, which means unable to be pleased. My professor of mine...
for instance, my dentist would be implacable when it comes to my plaque buildup.
Sure. An old professor of mine used that to describe some music of mine, and I really like that as a descriptor for music or for a piece of art.
That's awesome. Growing up, did you have a favorite book? One that really stood out or that you read more than once?
As a child, I remember I really liked the Roald Dahl books a lot. I can't remember if it's called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I really liked that one.
I believe it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but when it was made into a film, it was changed to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, I think it's one or the other, but I remember reading that one several times.
Yeah, that one's a classic. Also, for yourself and listeners out there, do not look up what snozberries are. It will ruin that series for you forever. Okay. Or make it even better. I don't know. If you had to evacuate your house, is there a first thing that you would grab?
My cat, probably.
What's your cat's name?
Iggy.
Aw. You a big fan of Iggy Pop, or?
No, not really. Although that must have been partially where that came from. We named him mostly after Ignatius J. Reilly, who is the main character in this novel, Confederacy of Dunces.
Wow, everything about what you just said is captivating. I am intrigued and now have a new book to read.
It's really a funny book, and he's sort of this cantankerous character.
With a name like that, I feel like you must be. Otherwise, it's just bad naming on your parents' part or the writer's part. Is there something that comes to mind when I say underrated?
Boy, I don't know. Not immediately.
So you'd say this question is then therefore overrated?
Sure. Yeah. I would say not asking this question is underrated. Just kidding.
Do you have a favorite industry secret or term that's only used in your particular line of work?
So like I said, I'm a poker player, and I like the idea of implied odds. which basically means, like, if you have a straight draw, say you have 9-8 on a board of say 10-7-2 or something, and you have 8 outs to improve on the next street. That is, you have 8 chances to hit a jack or a 6 when the next card is revealed. That means you have a 16% chance of hitting one of those cards. But you should actually be willing to call more than that 16% indicates, because of the chance that you're going to win even more when you do hit your straight and you're able to get a bet in on that next round of betting or those next 2 rounds of betting. And I think that applies well to a lot of areas of life where it's good to take some risks. And I think I got to a fairly late point in my life before I really understood that.
Yeah. It's kind of like when you're at a bar, the likelihood that the girl is interested, or the other person, doesn't be girl, but the other person is interested in you and is willing to, listen to you or, let you buy them a drink is relatively low. But if they do say yes, the reward is so much higher than the downside, which is getting turned down or, losing the $5 on the beer that you bought them.
That's absolutely right. Although I was never the sort of person who would talk to somebody in a bar.
That makes 2 of us, my friend.
Getting turned down would be mortifying, and putting yourself out there in that way was incredibly difficult.
You'd rather get one outer than turned down at a bar?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Is there a best piece of advice you feel like you've ever got that is either, stuck around, you feel yourself using, or really made a pivotal, kind of changing point in your life?
I guess, looking back, and this is going to sound like a really awful thing to say, but looking back at a lot of the advice I've received growing up about major life things, a lot of the advice has been terrible. I remember, this is awful. I'm not gonna say who said this, but I remember being 22 and talking to an old high school teacher of mine. And he asked me about my girlfriend at the time, and the big life advice I've gotten has been quite bad based on what I know now. I've gotten a lot of advice where if I'd taken it, it would have messed up my life in really complex ways. I did take some of the advice and it did mess up my life in really complex ways.
So maybe the advice is, in and of itself, look at advice with a grain of salt, or don't always take advice from people who look like they have their shit together, perhaps then.
Yeah, I think so. Although I'm not sure that's good advice either. I don't really know. I don't think that advice from people who have their lives together is categorically bad. Just that I happen to get bad advice.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, I guess all information deserves a second glance, maybe, or good people have bad ideas. Who knows?
Yeah, I think so. Or ideas that worked for them might not work for you, or ideas that worked for their generation might not work for your generation. I think that's a big one because
I totally understand.
I think that somebody who became a professor in 1990 or something like that is going to have a very different idea of how to get a job than someone trying to get a job in 2021.
I remember growing up, my father used to tell me when applying for a job, it was like, you go in person, you ask to speak to the manager, you shake his hand, you introduce yourself, you do all this stuff. And when he was telling this to me is when the whole online application started becoming like
Right.
the main track. I was like, Dad, that's not a thing anymore.
Right.
And it is kind of like very much like you're saying. It's just like, yeah, things change, and especially in this current, world we live in, it changes very quickly. So where advice is well meant, usually it doesn't always have the best run out. So it's definitely something to kind of keep track of the source and of, what it actually means in, the current climate you find yourself.
Yep, definitely.
You have a favorite anecdote you like to drop at a party or when meeting somebody new?
All right, I'm going to tell you one, and it's pretty gross. So if you want to cut it later, you can go ahead. So, 7 or 8 years ago, I was in Iceland with my brothers, and it was early July, about as warm as Iceland ever gets. And we were on the northern coast of Iceland, and we decided to take a whale watching trip. Now, I've been known to get carsick and seasick, but Dramamine always deals with it. So I thought, I'll take some Dramamine, I'll be fine. Mm-hmm. So I do. And we go on this trip on this small boat with maybe about 50 tourists from different countries. And we go out on the water in the Atlantic north of Iceland, and we find a whale almost right away, which is awesome, except that the water is incredibly choppy. And within a few minutes, I'm like, oh, this is bad. This is going to be bad. And so a few minutes after that, I'm puking over the side of the boat. And then a few minutes after that, I'm puking again over the side of the boat. And then a few minutes after that, I'm puking for a third time over the side of the boat. And after you've puked a couple times, there's nothing in your stomach anymore. I mean, it's just finding whatever it can to just get out of there. Yeah. And so at this point, I'm becoming conscious that, first of all, I'm in great distress. Like, this is awful. And I know that it's going to be okay once I reach the shore, but man, this is just destroying me right now. I continue puking. I puke something like 11 times over the course of an hour. And I'm just really aware that I must be just ruining the experience for everybody else. I feel awful about that. I don't really have much awareness of my surroundings because I can't look around. If I start looking around, then I'll get sick again. So I'm just looking down at my feet, with flecks of puke and spittle dripping from my mouth, swearing under my breath. I'm thinking about what I must have done to the side of the boat. Like, the side of the boat must look like
they need a new paint job.
Yeah, it looks like a wall in a horror movie, or it must, and I just feel terrible, but there's just nothing I can do, and so the trip finally ends after an hour or whatever. We get back to shore, and of course, within 10 minutes of being back on the shore, I'm fine, and I tell my brothers, I feel really bad. Like, I must have ruined the trip for everybody else in addition to puking, it's when you're that sick, it's very hard to puke discreetly, so I'm just loudly retching, and I was like, I feel awful about having done that. There's nothing I could have done, but I feel awful. And they're like, well, the water was really bad. You weren't the only person who was puking. There were a bunch of people puking. And I hadn't known that. So that did make me feel a little bit better. And then one of my brothers said, actually, there, right in front of us, there was this German tourist. And she stood ramrod straight the entire time. She was standing up on the boat with perfect German posture. And then at one point, about 45 minutes into the trip, she very economically and gracefully leaned over the side of the boat in a single motion and silently threw up into the sea, and then resumed standing ramrod straight again after that, and didn't say anything. And it was the same week as the 4th of July, and I thought, man, nobody celebrated being an American better than I did today. Like, USA #1. We win the gold medal in puking. We ruined the time for everybody else. I did it.
And your country appreciates it, Charlie.
Yes, thank you.
If you could work any of the jobs you've done over the course of your life, but get paid the same as the job where you made the most, which job would you work?
The one I currently have, which is also the one that pays the most, which is I'm a professional poker player. It's not the easiest job in some ways. Some days you just lose $10,000 or whatever,
or whatever,
But overall, it pays the best, and it's also a job that's really well suited to my temperament and my need to be free, I guess. If I ever want to take the day off, I just take it off.
Yeah, it definitely is the job with arguably in the most agency.
Yeah, a ton. I mean, there are a lot of problems with it. I have to buy health insurance, for example, and I mean, there's no guarantee I'm going to make money. And in fact, I might not make money for a fairly long period of time, and I have to plan for that. But it's not impossible to do because, overall the money I make is better than what I was doing before, which is teaching music at a small liberal arts college and also working as a writer.
Did you regret the process of the former, or was it the environment, or was it the pay that made it? Like, what of the job previous of working as a music teacher at a liberal arts college while writing that you didn't find nearly as gratifying as poker that made you want to leave?
Well, I mean, academia right now is kind of a mess. People are like, I'm going, I was in school until I was 30 or almost 30. And then you finish school and there's not a full-time job waiting for you when you finish, which seems like something's going wrong there if that's the case. So, I didn't have a full-time job. And I was basically working as if I were a full-time professor, but without, a full year salary and benefits. So it just, I liked my colleagues. I liked my students a lot. I liked the situation. I mean, I was teaching small classes of students who mostly cared. I mean, that aspect of it was great. I mean, some of my students were fantastic and they're now in grad school. But just in terms of where it took me in my life, I mean, it didn't really get me anywhere.
Mm. Is there something you regret not having done or tried before you graduated high school?
Before I graduated high school?
Or college? It's kind of one of those turning points in life where it's like you look back and, whether watching a movie or talking to friends, it's like, man, I didn't do that. I should have done that. And either had the opportunity or didn't even know necessarily it was a thing that you should have done. But looking back, it was, kind of in a way available to you.
This is going to sound like a dark joke. But I swear it's not. I wish I had started drinking earlier. And I don't say that to glorify drinking, really. But I was just a very judgmental person. Mm-hmm. I kind of grew up like that. My mom is like that. And there were just things that I thought were bad, and because I literally didn't drink anything until I was, I think, 26 or something like that. And I have people in my family who have, have had alcohol problems, and I sort of thought that it would be just like a Barney from The Simpsons type situation where I just take the
one
first
beer and it's all over.
Yeah, it's just like, where have you been all my life? And there were just a lot of things in my life that I approached that way in the name of staying on this very clear path and not clouding your mind with something you don't fully understand.
Mistaking fear for responsibility.
Yeah, and I really just in so many ways missed out on having a lot of fun as a young person because I was so buttoned up. So I'm not suggesting that people go become alcoholics or even that anybody who doesn't drink should go drink. That's not what I'm saying. But for me, I think it would have improved things for me.
Yeah, putting one foot in that door and seeing what it felt like, not like drinking on the regular, but like knowing what was beyond the veil and not being scared of it or worried about its potential consequences to your, being.
Right.
I have the exact same feeling when it comes to, I was raised in a very, when it came to drugs, especially a very kind of buttoned up family where, you only heard horror stories, one, and it's going to ruin your life kind of thing, to the point where my first experience with even a drug as low as marijuana wasn't until I was in my late 20s. And I missed out on 4 years of living in Humboldt County where I could have experienced a less processed version, known people that could have guided me in a more meaningful fashion. Not that it's something that has become a major tenant of my life, but rather just not judging it. Like you said, judging it. I don't know about you, but for me growing up, there was a large period of time where even if friends who I respected in every other way would do X, whether for you it was drinking, for me it was doing any kind of recreational drug, there was in the back of my mind this sort of oh, you're one of those people kind of thing.
Right.
You just ever so slightly or even more so judged them and respected them less for doing this thing that was actually in no way harmful, depending upon the person, arguably beneficial, just because of this predisposition that was given to you by family and or friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I sort of thought that once you proceeded down this path that nothing.
Game over, man.
Yeah, nothing in your life would be the same, right? You would always be fighting against that. You had a couple drinks on Friday, and then on the following Wednesday, when you were trying to do your homework, you'd just be fighting through this fog in your brain because you'd had alcohol. In reality, it's not like that at all.
No. Yeah, it is definitely is one. It's kind of somehow, even though we are, in 2021, it sounds like we were both raised by a temperance union or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm, my mom is English and German and is very sort of, Calvinist in her outlook,
Teetotaler, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. What's the most bizarre fact to be true?
All right. So, I'm going to flip this one around on you. Okay.
All right. Hit me.
And, so you're from the state of Nevada, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about the state of Nevada. Okay. All right. First question. Name these cities from east to west. Okay.
Okay.
All right. San Francisco, Las Vegas.
I know where this is going.
Phoenix, Los Angeles, and Reno.
So we've got San Francisco, Reno, Las Vegas, Phoenix, and LA.
Yeah.
San Francisco is the farthest. Oh, so east to west. Okay. So I know the couple that are switched, I think. So I think I'm going to get this wrong by one, but I believe it's Phoenix, Phoenix. This is where I'm not sure. I know the last two. I get this weird feeling it's Phoenix, LA, Las Vegas, Reno, San Francisco.
Okay, so you know the trick, but
Yes.
yeah, that's not quite right. It's Phoenix, then Las Vegas, then LA, then Reno, and then San Francisco. So Reno is actually west of LA.
Yeah. No, I knew that when I grew up in Northern Nevada. That was an interesting thing brought up at way too many dinner table conversations with my father. So I got the Las Vegas, LA flipped.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I played myself. Damn it.
Yeah. You went too far with it. But yeah, I always thought that was funny because of the way that both Nevada and California sort of curve down instead of going straight south on their borders.
Yeah. That was a fun one.
Yeah, there's lots of things like that on the East Coast too. Like Atlanta is west of Columbus, Ohio, for example.
That's wild. Wait, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
again,
amazing.
because of the way the East Coast sort of curves.
Slants.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Okay, so one more.
Yep.
All right. So the towns of Elko and Winnemucca in northern Nevada both have annual festivals dedicated to what unusual ethnicity?
Is it it's the same one for both?
Yeah, it's the same one for both.
I feel like this is, I don't know if this is too obvious for me or too obvious in general, but I would say Navajo.
Oh, interesting. No, well, I'm not positive, but the one I was thinking of is Basque.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know if you knew about that, but apparently
I did not. That's fascinating. Yeah, I didn't. I was actually really close to both of those, but not close enough to know that.
Really close is probably a couple hours away, right?
Yeah, Nevada's a surprisingly large state. I think it's the 8th largest state in the union. It's actually surprisingly huge. It's kind of, this is a long reach, but it's kind of like the Africa of the United States. People think it's a lot smaller than it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I lived in a tiny town called Fallon, which is an hour and a half from Winnemucca, and I think 2-something hours from Elko. Surprised that they both have bass festivals. I guess they are they close to each other? I don't actually remember where Elko is.
It's in the northwest, right?
Okay, so it's farther north than Winnemucca. So it's probably a shared community.
I hope that's right.
Then that sounds about right.
Yeah,
it's either northwest or northeast, but I would have to imagine it's northwest.
It's in the north anyway.
Really in the east. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the
idea is that a lot of there was some sort of there was war in the area where the Basque lived in Europe in the middle of the 19th century. So they came out during the gold rush to the western U.S. and then ended up not getting so deeply into that, but instead becoming shepherds and ranchers.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and so there's this Basque culture that still is a thing in that area, which really surprised me.
I love it when cultures, like, there's little like niche pockets of culture in unassuming areas.
Yeah,
like apparently there's a big German contingent in like Minnesota or Michigan or something like that.
Oh, huge!
And like it's like to the point where there is a variant of German that is only for that area. It's kind of like the Afrikaans equivalent for America, where it's just like is German English hybrid.
Huh.
It's not either or neither. It's fascinating.
Huh.
I was just learning about this the other day.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd be interested to know where exactly that is.
Yeah. One last Nevada fun fact before we go. The percentage of Nevada that is owned by the government is, I believe, north of 85%.
Yeah, I knew it was a solid majority for sure.
Yeah. It's overwhelming, especially considering the amount of population. It's not small, like Nevada's not a big state, but considering so much of it is effectively uninhabitable.
Right.
It's like kind of staggering at how much population there is.
So what happens with all that land? You just can't go in there?
They blow it up.
Right. So you just can't go there.
Yeah, it's owned by the government, and they usually like to, have fighter jets drop bombs on it and see what happens.
Right.
because there's nothing living out there, so there's very few groups that are going to be like, oh no, you can't kill scorpions.
Right.
Like, they don't care about those. Yeah, there was a town there was a road going out of the town that I grew up in Nevada that would get shut off for 2 hours at a time when they were doing like strafe runs with F-18s. And so like sometimes you would drive that. I remember a friend was like, oh, I'm going to go home. I'll see you guys later. Left and then came back 20 minutes later and we're like, I thought, wow, that was fast. I thought you lived way out. He goes, yeah, they're doing a thing. I can't actually get home. It would take me longer to go all the way around. And then, so I was just like, I'll just wait. And so he just came back and hung out with us for like an hour or so and then drove home.
Yeah. Huh. That's funny.
All right. Fill in the blank for me. This weekend was so great. I spent 13 hours.
I think it would have something to do with making music. Recording music or writing music, something like that.
Be awesome.
Although that's a lot of time. Music. Yeah. I mean, if you spend 13 hours in the recording studio, I'm not sure great is the right word. But it would be
probably some problems.
It would be productive, you'd be exhausted afterwards, but you'd probably have something pretty good.
Yeah. That's either one of two things happened. Either you had the craziest writer or musician's block, or you had the best session of your life.
Right.
Like you came out with no songs or all the songs.
Right, exactly.
What's something you see in someone else that makes you want to be friends with them?
Boy, that's a hard one. I mean, I guess it could be a lot of things. I'm trying to think of if there's a quality that unites my friends. And I'm not sure there is. And I think on some reflection, what might be the most honest answer might have something to do with what they see in me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think if most people are being honest, that's what they actually respond the most to. Is when they see you for the quality that either you want to be providing or the one that you appreciate being noticed for the most. Yeah, like they're capable of noticing something about you. I mean, like that, and I I don't want friendships to be people who come from nowhere and don't do anything, but are somehow capable of recognizing that. But I think that can be sort of a cue that a friendship that there's a strong basis for a friendship there. Is when they notice something like that.
I'm trying to say introspection backwards.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out. My mouth does not understand how to say that.
Right.
But yeah, the inverse of introspection is what you look for.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't look for it, but I do know that like I've had friendships that have developed in part because someone has seen something like that, and I've noticed that they've seen it, and I think that I don't know if that reflects badly on me or whatever, but I think it's probably broadly true for a lot of people, and you know what they say, like the most, if you're looking for a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. The most attractive quality a person could have is finding you attractive. So I don't know. I don't know if that means I'm this like great narcissist or whatever, but that's what immediately comes to mind. But I guess I would say also, I like friends who have exceptional talents and who are perceptive, can look at something that I'm also looking at and see something I didn't see, or find a way of phrasing something that I did see in a way that is new and interesting to me.
That's a great way of putting that. Is there something that you wish you had started sooner that you do or at one point did?
Yeah. So I think you might be planning on asking me later, like what piece of advice you would give your last self. And can I just go ahead and answer that one now?
Sure. If you could go back in time and tell yourself one sentence. I guess this sounds like the kind of same thing.
It's a similar thing, yeah.
If you could go back in time and tell yourself one sentence, what would it be and when would it be?
Yeah, I would go back to when I was 21 or something, and I would say, don't go to grad school. And if I could expand that to a more complex sentence, I would say,
Nope. Let's misinform the masses and just leave that the way it is.
I'm not even sure that's misinforming them. Like, don't go to grad school unless it's you can go to grad school and there's certain master's programs that all but guarantee you a job on the other side. That's fine. But don't try to become an academic. Unless you're independently wealthy, it's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And so, what I would do instead, to go back to the question you just asked, is to play poker. If I go back to when I was 21 and start playing poker then, and have a much higher risk tolerance than I actually had when I was 21, that would be way better for me.
So just go back and be like, all right, play poker. You're going to lose. It's okay. Ciao.
Yeah, you're going to lose for a brief period of time, and then you're going to start winning. And you will be on a good path for yourself, like much more quickly than going to grad school, which was, I don't want to say a waste of time, because it was many years of my life that I, in many ways, enjoyed, and I wasn't in jail or anything, but in terms of my future, it was awful.
Yeah, it cost a lot of money, put you on a path to, struggle with very little reward, like only like a kind of morally intrinsic reward, nothing financial, and just a lot of headache. To then come 8 or so years later to doing this thing that you could have been doing the whole entire time.
Yeah, and I think there's no, you can't go back and fix it, of course. And the reasons I did that were, first of all, because I sought some, being a sort of naturally cautious person, I sought some sort of institutional approval for what I was doing. While also, wanting to do something that was like a little bit crazy and not very popular, so I was writing, really crazy music, but I was doing it within the confines of a university, which gave me something to tell the adults in my life,
Yeah.
That validated, like, okay, this is why I'm writing this piece where I take,
you were coloring inside the lines. You were doing the, in quotes, right thing.
Yeah, like what I was actually doing was like buying a bunch of like fishing wire and nuts and bolts and putting them in a piano, and making all these crazy noises. But this university said it was cool, so
therefore
checkmate.
Yeah, exactly. On the flip side of the initial question, and maybe it's the same answer, but what do you wish you had ended sooner that you have?
I don't know. I guess again, school is the obvious answer. I think that there were certain relationships I had that I probably could have ended earlier, but I don't think that's, if you go too far with regretting things, you just end up wishing you were a different person, and that's not what I wish, so I don't want to go too far with it, but yeah, I made some mistakes, and other than the grad school thing, which was genuinely life altering for a long period of time, I'm not sure I horribly regret them.
Nice. All right, and one last question before we throw it to a break. If you could make sure listeners of this podcast heard one song, which song would it be?
So part of my identity throughout like my late teens and my 20s, and even to some extent continuing to today, has been knowing that not everyone likes the music I like. And for me, it's been clear for a very long time that music is not exactly universal in the way that people often say it is. Like, it's certainly a more universal language than language itself, right? Like it will be easier for you to get into, say, West African music than it will be for you as an English speaker to learn a West African language. But on some level, you'll appreciate it more if you do the work of really learning it and of enjoying the process of learning it. And so when we listen to music, we're all responding to different sets of cultural understandings and cues that are unique to us. So, I like a lot of music that is pretty far off the beaten path. And I have no real expectations that someone else who's not already into that music would like it. Because I've seen that, when I was doing presentations in school to other music majors, they reacted very negatively to a lot of the music I presented. Like I did presentations on free jazz, for example, when I was an undergrad, and people in the fairly conservative college I went to did not like that at all. So, would I tell those people, like, you have to get into free jazz? Like, no, it's like they would be cooler if they did, but like, they're not going to like it, and
it feels like we're going a long roundabout way to saying that you don't have an answer. Is that
I mean,
correct?
It is. It's very hard to give an answer.
All right. Well, and with that, we're going to throw it to our first break. Feel free to stick around and enjoy the totally real commercial, or take a minute to enjoy Sounds of Silence, or just fast forward. Either way, see you in a jiffy. Do you ever find yourself doing a mundane activity with nothing to keep you from gouging your eyes out or sticking a pencil through one ear and out the other? Uh-huh. Well, then perhaps I could introduce you to music. Music comes in a variety of different types, flavors, and colors. Theorists say that it's the best thing to introduce to your life since food. So go out and get some and make your life just a little bit more bearable. And we're back. So Charlie, what is your passion?
I guess, my passion is songwriting. I studied music composition as a student, which is writing classical music. But I've also always written rock music, and I think that's the thing that I really like. And for a long time, I thought of those disciplines as being completely separate. But I like, the change of one chord to another and picking the right chord to go to next. I like an unexpected leap in a melody. I like the combination of the interesting chord change with the unexpected leap in the melody. I like writing a good lyric. I like writing a lyric that maybe undercuts the mood of the music. And I like linking all these things together and having something at the end that is multi-layered and complex, and being like, yeah, I wrote that.
That's awesome. Is there, and this is not to try to draw a question for, like, draw an answer for the last question that was asked, but is there, are there artists that really kind of shaped the way you look and create rock music? Or is it, a collaboration of too many million things that there isn't any particular notes of any particular artist?
There are lots. So, I mean, I kind of came of age in the 90s. And so, Nirvana was a really big deal to me. Some slightly crazier artists like Sonic Youth, and a bunch of stuff that was happening in New Zealand at the time. The Chills, the Verlaines, I really like them a lot. And there's an American songwriter named Scott Miller, who was in a couple bands game theory and especially the Loud family. And he had this...
Sounds like a bad neighbor to live next to.
Yeah. So he had a way of writing lyrics that was very unlike most rock music that I really liked a lot. It had the wordy quality of hip hop, which I also like quite a bit.
Oh, that's really cool.
And I also really liked hip hop in the way hip hop would refer to things that were specific. Mm-hmm. A lot of rock music does not really do that, and a lot of rock lyrics just sound like vague pseudo poetry.
Yeah.
And
it's like if you took out the guitar and added in a couple snaps, you would have a beat poet.
Right. I don't like that about rock music. I mean, there's artists who really pull it off and where I don't mind that they do it. And I think there's a lot of value in saying something non-specific and being able to evoke something in the mind of the listener. But I also really like being able to write a song where you're like, this person is named this and they did this, Mm-hmm. And that's something,
tell a story.
Yeah, and that's something that I think I got as much from hip hop as I got from rock music.
That's awesome. One of my previous guests would be very annoyed if I didn't ask. Have you listened to MF Doom?
Not recently, but
that kind of reminds me of what you're talking about when you're talking about very specific, kind of telling a story. That is something that I'm not that much of a hip hop aficionado, but after Cyrus forced me to listen to a bunch of MF Doom, which I very much appreciatively have done, that is something that sounds very similar to the way he kind of constructed his songs. Yeah,
I don't know a ton about him, but everything I've ever heard has just been like, wow. I mean, this level of like dexterity is just ridiculous. I mean, the way he's patterning his rhymes is almost like a maze. Mm-hmm. And that's something at that level, that's something that you can't really do in rock music. It's not really possible. No. Because you have a melody,
you have this instrumentation that would get in the way of, right?
Yeah. When you have a melody, you have syllables that have to go in specific places or else you don't have the same melody anymore. Whereas if you're rapping, then you don't have a melody. And so you have a lot more flexibility to place the syllables where you want, which leads to all kinds of interesting things in hip hop, starting, sort of like post 1987 or so, where rappers are using increasingly fractured structures and they go to extremely weird places. And MF Doom is, as far as I know, about as weird a place as things can possibly go.
Yeah.
In that way.
When did you get started or like introduced to like rock music or like song creation? When do you know when that is? There like a pivotal moment where you can go back to and see where that began for you?
I started playing guitar when I was 8, and I didn't really like it at first. My parents made me stick with it, and then I guess when I was 11 or so, I got into metal for a while, and that's when I started really getting interested in learning to play the guitar better. After a couple years of that, I moved on to punk and indie rock, and that is my music. Like that's my happy place there. And I think that without punk and stuff that came after it, my interest in pop music probably would not have gone very far.
That's fascinating. It's interesting. I've had, I think, like 3 or so musical artists on the podcast, and it's interesting to note how often it seems that parents foist a musical instrument on the child is like whatever about it, and then they really start to excel when the child either sets it down and picks it back up or chooses to pick it up for their own personal reasons. And how much of like a kind of through line of that is like very few people in our day and age seem to do well and thoroughly enjoy something when they didn't choose it.
Yeah. And I think there's, to be fair to my 8-year-old self, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I didn't have a stereo or my own music to listen to at that time. And, a big factor in a lot of that is just that instruments, like beginner instruments, are terrible. Like they're just awful instruments that are really hard to play. So
you're terrible at playing them.
Yeah, I mean, my first guitar, like the action is just really high, so it was very hard to push down the strings. I just had an acoustic, and for an 8-year-old, I mean, it's very painful and difficult to play. And you get a much nicer guitar, and all of a sudden, it's a lot more fun.
So, do you remember when you wrote your first song? Like you're in your teens, you're listening to punk music, playing guitar, really enjoying it. Do you have a copy, or do you remember what the first song you wrote was about? Was it just instrumental, or was there words?
Yeah, I was 11 or 12, and I was playing music with some guys. We thought of ourselves as a metal band, but we were not really good enough. You have to be good at music to play metal, basically, and we weren't very good, so we didn't really know what punk rock was then, but that's what it basically sounded like. Just a handful of chords, and I don't remember any of the lyrics, but they're just how I'm sad and the world is bad, that kind of thing.
The human experience. It's interesting. You said that metal music is hard to play. In what way do you mean that? Because I feel like a lot of people sadly assume that metal music is just like, oh, it's people, yelling into the microphone and playing incomprehensible, thrash jumble kind of thing.
Well, it's it's really hard to play things that are incomprehensible. If you're going to repeat them, it's incredibly hard. If you're just going to jam and improvise something, then I guess it's not that hard probably to make something incomprehensible. But to do something that you're going to repeat, it's very tricky. And when you're moving from the very basic structures that you're initially taught in music, this is 4/4 time. This is beat 2, you hit the snare drum, and beat 4, you hit the snare drum. When you're breaking from things like that, you're breaking from typical chords, and it gets very hard. I mean, and in order for something to sound heavy, it needs to be precise for the most part. So you've got 4 or 5 people playing incredibly precisely. That's extremely hard to do, especially when the rhythms and the chords are not very intuitive. So, I mean, a lot of metal musicians are incredibly good. And you're right. I mean, they probably don't get that much credit for that because of how they look or how, the image they convey. But yeah, metal music is really hard to play.
So kind of along that same tone, pun intended, what's the biggest misconception about like music writing and music creation by the wider world, would you say?
I think that, and this is a misconception that I had for, at least a decade after I started doing it, that it's all about this, burst of inspiration, and that the power of it comes largely from this moment of creative spark. Like that's part of it, but the maximum about genius being 99% perspiration really applies to making rock music and making pop music. It's very technically difficult to do, and there's making a record is really hard.
It's all about perseverance, not necessarily about like the spontaneity of the idea.
Yeah, and a lot of things that even a lot of the things that go into making a record sound spontaneous or making it sound like people playing live in a room are actually something that some engineer sat and thought for hours about and twiddled knobs for hours to do. Mm-hmm. And so there's all these people on the back end of making a rock record, for example, or the sound person at a show, if the show is if the sound is any good at a show. There's all these people like that never appear in photos of bands or whatever, are never really interviewed except by weird trade publications, who are doing so much to make things sound the way they're supposed to sound, and that's all extremely technical.
So that kind of arises an interesting question that probably doesn't have a clean answer. Do you prefer live music or like a studio album as a general kind of rule?
I prefer studio albums. For one thing, I mean, and the older I get, the more I find this to be true. Going to a live concert, a live rock concert specifically, there's something objectively unpleasant about it. And that's not to say that it's not fun, but that you are being hit with a sound that is so loud that you feel it physically. After 45 minutes, you feel exhausted. You're surrounded by people sweating in a very cramped space. So just in terms of what it does to your body, I mean, it's difficult. And I think also I prefer studio recordings because you can make them sound the way you want them to sound and freeze it like that. And, you know, I think I've changed a lot of things I've done in my life, but one thing that's been constant for me is making rock music. And I think that's, you know, it's like, I feel like if I'm not writing music, I feel like I'm going to die. I'm aware of my own mortality. And I think that's partly because writing music is on some level what I'm meant to do. But I also think it's because, you know, on some level, it's a way of leaving something behind. Like after I die, these recordings, however good or bad they might be, are still going to be out there, and somebody will be able to find them if they want to find them.
Yeah. So before we leave the passionate side of this podcast behind, is there a non-obvious aspect of song creation that you'd like to explain to the audience?
I mean, the thing that, again, that stands out is just the knob twiddling aspect of it. The how important it is to find the right kind of reverb, and, you know, how much as I've made more and more music, and I've gotten better at it, and I've learned in some limited way to do certain things like that. How much I've learned to appreciate people who are really good at that. You know, if you are a recording engineer, which I am absolutely not, I record vocals in my house, but that's about it. You know, you have, your job is to sit in a room trying to make a band sound good, and you probably didn't choose them. Like they paid you, right? And so you took the work, and you're trying to make them sound good. They're probably not very good. So that's going to be difficult. And you've just got to listen to a vocalist doing 20 takes of the same thing over and over again. And if you react and making probably the same mistake or variations on the same mistake over and over and over, and if you react in any way other than just complete zen calmness, you're just going to make the situation infinitely worse and seem really unprofessional. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these people who do these jobs are, I mean, just the level of self-control they have to do them is just incredible to me. And so I think as I've learned more about the process, those are the people I admire more than anything else. Yeah,
definitely is the unsung heroes, again, pun intended.
Yeah.
An interesting thought, and if you can parse this, that would be great. If you can't, we'll move right along. How much would you say between coming up with the song, like kind of, you know, words and figuring out, you know, what key you want to play it in and whatever, versus playing it in like the recording session, would you say, like, what percentage is song creation? Like, how much of it is, you know, coming up with the impetus and like the idea, and how much of it is just like spending, you know, playing it and like getting it just right?
So I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago about this question, I would have said something pretty different. And I think I've learned a lot in just the past 5 years, actually, about how better to do that. So, because my background is in punk rock and indie rock, these genres of music that are in some ways can be relatively simple. They're not always that way at all, but just in terms of the chords and the time signatures and stuff, generally not the most complex kinds of music. What I would have done like 10 years ago is just, write the chords, write the lyrics, and then make a basic voice recording on my phone or whatever recording device I was using, and then send that out to people and then have them come up with parts from there. And I think that's what most bands do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point a few years ago, I just started opening the music software program that I use to write classical music and writing everything that way. And using the background that I have in classical music that I went to years and years of school for, to basically compose everything. And I'm finding that to be, in some ways, a much, much better process where, in the past, if I wanted to add a keyboard, for example, I wouldn't really have thought about that until I knew what all the guitars and drums were going to be doing, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but it basically means that the keyboard is going to be an addendum to the song that already existed. Whereas if I'm writing it this way now, I've got this software program up, I'm putting in a keyboard from the very beginning, which leaves open the possibility that the keyboard could be a really important part of the song, which means that there's just many, many more ways that things can go, So I, at this point, I'm doing a lot more sweating over these sorts of details that go well beyond this initial flash of inspiration. And it was almost as if I was being lazy before, and I wasn't trying to be lazy, and I didn't know I was being lazy, but I just wasn't using that side of myself. And now I am, and I like it a lot better. So there's a lot at this point that I can do even before getting into a recording studio or whatever, that has to do with me sweating out the details of how things are going to sound.
So, if I might sum up, it turns out those 4 years of graduate school weren't wasted.
I think actually I could have done a lot of this stuff with just my undergrad education, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
No, it's just, I'm mostly teasing.
I was, yeah, no, but it's a fair question. Like I spent 6 years or 8 years in grad school, and I worked hard. I had to have done something, so I'm glad it's coming out somehow.
It's paying off in some way.
Yeah.
All right. From the passionate to the obnoxious, Charlie, what is your preposterous peeve?
So here's the peeve. So if you can imagine being in line for a front desk at a hotel, or maybe a bank, or like a rental car company at an airport, and you're waiting in line, there are 2 or more clerks, right? And you could see either of these clerks. They don't specialize in different things. Either one of them could help you. And they're both currently helping other customers, and you're just there waiting, right? Now, a second person comes up to this hotel front desk or whatever, who also wants to be helped by the hotel staff. But instead of getting behind you in line, they pretend like there are 2 separate lines for the two people who are available to help. And that makes me really angry. I'm maybe like 10% angry at the business for not having some sort of roped off thing that clarifies, like, hey, there's one line here. But I'm 90% angry at the other person for pretending there are 2 lines. Why would there be 2 lines? And
you've lived in society for more than a day, guy. To stop pretending like, this is. Do you feel like you're getting lied to? Do you think that they're doing it earnestly, or like arrogantly? Like, are they like so naive, like this is their first time to a hotel that, you know, they're like going over there? Or is it like more annoying if it's like they're doing it with malintent in mind?
Well, the fact that I don't know what their intention is part of the annoyance, right? Like if there were just one line and they skipped in front of me in line, I would just be like, oh, that person's an asshole. And and there's, you know, that's easy. You know, I could
so specifically when you're the only person in line that it like really comes up?
I mean, I guess it could come up with, and it has come up with many people involved. I mean, it's actually probably worse when there are, you know, 2 or more people doing it correctly, and then another person comes up and tries to form a second line, because then it's a lot more obvious. But yeah, I mean, they're acting like it's like a grocery store checkout situation where you actually do have to stand in separate lines. Yeah. But I guess part of the annoyance is that if you were to call them out on it, they could act like they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
like you're being crazy, you know?
That potential naivete, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like,
stop being insane, you know? So I mean, they're gaslighting you before you've even said anything.
That is the most annoying part of that to me, for sure, is the like, dude, why are you being like, geez, fine, I'll, you know, gosh, you don't have to be such a dick about it. It's like, you're the one cheating. You're the one like, right. You know, you're the one sitting over here. I am playing by the rules, and like I called you out on it, and now I am the asshole. Like, what is this?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Worst. And especially the one that drives me insane is the like the naivete before that. It's like, what? I mean, it could have been. It's like, dude, come on.
Right.
You've been on the planet. You don't look 4. You've been on the planet for more than a year. You know that this is the way it works in every situation, except for, you know, like the grocery store or something like that, where they have like their own separate things. It's like, stop pretending.
Right.
Like, and then like put it like, you know, putting the blame on me because I had the audacity to like seek for order in this chaos that we call Earth.
Yeah, which is why I'm 10% angry at the business for not clarifying things, because it is a situation where things should be clarified.
Yeah.
And even if it only results in you know, losing an extra 2 minutes or something, which is probably what's going to happen. There's this sense of being taken advantage of or slighted that it's hard. I don't like it.
Yeah. No, it's the worst. It's like there's no fix for it too. It's like the friend that's always joking but saying mean shit. If you call him out, it's like, I was just joking. It's
I was joking.
Dude, you're being mean. But then when you take that like persecutory route, then you're the asshole, and like somehow what you were doing was not okay, even though what he was doing was like way worse. It's like there's no fix.
Right, yeah, like you've made, okay, I get, you've made 63 jokes about my bald spot or whatever, you know? They're hilarious, but it's starting to seem kind of malicious.
Yeah, it was the thing in the 90s of there was a summer, I was in summer school for PE, which should tell you plenty about me as a person. And there was one girl in the high school summer school PE class when she would just make these awful, they weren't even jokes, it was just slights. It's like, well, you know, you're a dumb bitch. Just kidding. It's like, that's not a joke. You're just saying like mean shit.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And it was like a constant. I like ran into it like watching TV shows from the 90s. That's a thing that was in quote, like, you know, oh, this is funny. It's like, no, it's not. It's just mean.
Yeah. Mike Birbiglia has a really good bit about that, about a girlfriend he had when he was like 14 who would do stuff like that to him all the time.
Yeah, that's off of, I think, my favorite special by his, My Girlfriend's Boyfriend.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I cannot.
That one's great, yeah.
He's more of a storyteller than a comedian, though it is hilarious throughout. But it is just, I think that's one of my top 5 specials I recommend to anybody. It's just, I think it's just bangers all throughout. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I love that one.
But yeah, I knew people like that in high school. It's just like, are you though? Is that kidding?
Right.
Is that kidding, or are you just a bag of shit? All right. And with that, we're going to head to our second break, but don't go anywhere, because when we get back, Charlie is going to enter the lightning round. See you in a minute. Have you ever just looked at fried carbs on a plate and thought, I need to eat those, but it doesn't taste all that appetizing? Introducing catsup. Catsup is a sugary and red syrupy paste that'll overshadow any unappreciated taste. Simply douse the unpreferred tasting object and ingest. Mmm. Thanks, catsup. And we're back. Charlie, are you ready to enter the lightning round?
Bang, bang, bang. Is there a god or
Lightning round.
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Put however much time it takes to bake this cookie on the clock. Charlie, is there a god?
No.
Shakira's voice in Danny DeVito's body or Danny DeVito's voice in Shakira's body?
Shakira's voice in Danny DeVito's body.
Wine or beer?
Beer.
Are hot dogs sandwiches?
Yes.
You're having the best day of your life. What happens next? Another amazing thing or something terrible?
Something terrible.
Lions, tigers, or bears?
All of them.
Is 0 a number?
Yes.
Would you rather give up cheese or naps?
Cheese.
Bow ties or suspenders?
Neither.
Have you ever paid more for a meal than you made in a week?
Yes.
No one's looking. Do you put the cart back or leave it in the parking lot?
Put it back.
If you had the power to see the future but couldn't change it, would you use it?
Yes.
Over or under?
Over.
Pineapple on pizza or fist fight?
Pineapple on pizza.
Can billionaires be ethical?
No.
Kill the spider or get an adult?
Kill the spider.
Red or blue?
Blue.
Is there a price for you to give up your passion forever?
No.
Salsa or Lindy Hop?
Salsa.
Dog or cat?
Cat.
Sunny side up, scrambled, or hard boiled?
Scrambled.
Which do you max out first? Intelligence, charisma, or strength?
Intelligence.
Pizza or pasta?
Pasta.
Popsicle or Klondike bar?
Klondike bar.
Are we alone in the universe?
No.
Would you rather have your inner monologue sound like Gilbert Gottfried or Fran Drescher?
They're the same. I don't know. Same.
Are Cheez-Its addicting?
No.
Kanye.
No.
Boneless or bone-in wings?
Bone in.
Tacos or burritos?
Tacos.
Morning or night shift?
Night.
Congratulations, Charlie. You've survived the lightning round. In turn, your reward is, what lightning round question would you like to ask me, and in turn be asked to future guests?
Okay, this isn't an original, but I do feel like it's revealing. I Googled interesting yes/no questions or something like that, and went through a long list of them. And this is my favorite one of the ones I saw. Would you rather be 10 minutes late to everything or 20 minutes early?
So, I appreciate your honesty on how you found the question. I would rather be 20 minutes early for everything, but I know that I'm going to be 10 minutes late for everything. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how that one tracks out. All right, Charlie, is there anything you want to plug, recommend places people can find you or your content?
Yeah, I have a podcast about poker called Third Man Walking, and you can find me on Twitter at Third Walking, THIRD Walking.
Is there any place people could find the music you create?
Yes, you can go to, what would be the best here? My band's Fox Japan, which is foxjapan at bandcamp.com, and Oblivs, which is oblivz.bandcamp.com.
So you have two bands?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. Fox Japan is FOXJAPAN.
Mm-hmm.
All one word?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Charlie, for being my guest today, and special thanks to my editor, Richard Ashford, and my composer, Joshua Gibbons. And especially thank you, everybody listening at home, or wherever you found the time to appreciate this. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, or just share it with a friend. Every little bit helps. Or if you already have and are out of episodes to listen to, don't worry. We put out new episodes every Monday at midnight on Soundcloud at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves, and on YouTube at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast, all one word with an ampersand in the middle. And remember, folks, wheels go round, heat rises, and wherever I go, I like to give high fives. Be good, y'all.